What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Learn with Lo. If you've been with us and following along with our series and my stories this month, you know that I have been super pumped about announcing my new course that launches on January 6th, my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. So hopefully you guys have been excited on joining that journey with me, whether you join the course, which I hope that you do, or even just enjoying the journey of our conversations here on Live with Learn with Lo have been such an awesome year. So I'm excited to round out the year strong and even start out 2024 with some opportunities to really get involved and to understand kind of like what I do behind the scenes, even with a lot of people from a one-on-one standpoint, because I know it's not always in the cards for everybody to, seek out a practitioner one-on-one or really feel like you want or need that support, but you get to kind of have that same experience of all of that success that I've seen with my clients and their nutritional journey in that 6-week functional nutrition reset. So if you're interested in that Master Your Metabolism course, we do go live January 6th, and I'm really, really pumped for that. So early bird special runs out on December 15th though. So don't sleep on that if you're thinking about joining us, right? So continuing some of those, like I said, conversations, I want to really get into the depths of kind of like where some of the passion for this course comes from, where some of the inspiration for this information comes from, and 90% of it is the conversations that I have behind the scenes with my one-on-one private clients who teach me more about myself and my practice than I'm sure they even learned from me. So it's definitely a give and take reciprocity relationship, which is why I love this work so much and why I'm so passionate about bringing it to literally everybody, and knowing that they can definitely take some really, really positive stuff for their own health journey from it. So behind the scenes, I know something that's been coming up quite a bit in conversations with clients is this topic of root cause medicine, right? This has been coming up kind of time and time again. And whether you call it functional medicine, alternative medicine, woo-woo science, or honestly, you just call it medicine, because honestly, that's the way we should be practicing medicine. I really see my role as a functional medicine practitioner or a functional nutrition practitioner is to help individuals understand how their symptoms or concerns actually fit together, right? It's the pieces of the puzzle and helping them uncover and peel back the layers to really discover what the root cause of a lot of those issues are, right? They kind of come in feeling like they have 15 different seemingly unrelated symptoms, and I start to get a feel of their journey, and I'm like, a lot of this traces back to kind of like one root cause, right? And how do we start to go back to that, really get the dominoes starting to fall in our favor, and how many things start to correct themselves, right? Once we start to give the body the resources that it needs to function properly. So it's really about looking and zooming out and treating the body more holistically versus like these isolated parts and pieces, right? And one of the best examples I think I can give is even some individuals that feel like they've kind of gone into more of the functional nutrition space or worked with other functional practitioners. And even that world, don't get me wrong, is very practitioner to practitioner dependent. I'll just say that, right? So don't just think that this blanket statement of they practice more functional nutrition or they practice more alternative therapies that you're going to get all the same, because it's not that way, right? So when we think about someone that truly understands a functional nutrition kind of perspective is somebody that's viewing the body as a whole piece, right? We're viewing the body holistically. We're treating it as one unit, not just pulling one system out, tinkering with it, and putting it right back into the same body and expecting it to work any differently, right? So one of the best examples I guess I can give is especially all of the individuals that I work with from a gut health perspective, they may be coming in and they know they're I have gut issues, I have reflux, I have indigestion, I have heartburn, I have food sensitivities, I have gallbladder issues, I have loose stools, I have urgent stools, I have constipation patterns, I have bloating, whatever it might be. They come in and kind of expect, or maybe what they've tried on their own or with other practitioners that maybe worked for a second and then they're right back to the starting line, is because a lot of times we try to literally physically pull the gut out of the body and tinker with it, right? It's like, ooh, let's throw some glutamine on the gut, or here's a food sensitivity test, and let's take out gluten or take out dairy or take out whatever lit up on your food sensitivity test, or let's put this little probiotic in, right? So we come out and we like tinker with the gut, and then we try to put the gut back into the same environment that made it sick in the first place. And we wonder why didn't it get any better? I threw a probiotic at it. I took glutamine. I took gluten out of my diet. I did this, I did that. It's like, yeah, that's not gut health, right? That's not functional practices. That's not alternative medicine. That is someone that's still following more of like a conventional isolated symptom management type model. Pull it out, tinker with it, and try to put it right back into the same body that made it sick in the first place. It's like, oh, no. Like, we need to, yes, maybe address the gut, but we need to pull out, address the gut, but we also need to take big picture and kind of look at like, how did it get here? What were the series of events in your life, in your health history, genetic predisposition? What's the environment around the gut? Because we need to optimize that environment as well as optimize the gut, put the two back together. Now all of a sudden we have this perfect synchronicity where the gut becomes back into a more homeostatic environment, right? So that's just one very, very small example of where this like conversation around root cause medicine starts to take place, right? And so with that, I think more and more what I've been seeing in my space as a functional nutrition practitioner is individuals that come to me frustrated either with that exact like functional model that maybe they've tried somewhere else, or they're frustrated with more of their like conventional medical model, because it used to be that I felt like we could kind of count on more of that like let me back up. I see a lot of individuals that get like overwhelmed and frustrated, especially because they feel like they used to be able to go to their doctor who is more of like an MD, right? Those medical practitioner like an MD, and they could count on that MD truly acting as what I would call like their medical detective, right? That's what I think that the letters MD should stand for, is like, somebody that's really behind me and they're listening to my symptoms, they're listening to my concerns and my goals, and they're helping me become an active medical detective to put the pieces of my journey together. When in reality, what it feels like now more is that those MDs are having to practice in a system that actually makes them more like medication dealers, right? So we have these same letters like MD, and what I feel like root cause medicine is truly somebody that's going to step up to the plate and advocate for you as like a medical detective, right? Regardless of the letters behind someone's name. I don't care if that is what someone is helping you do and become that advocate and that medical detective, great. Versus a lot of people are becoming more increasingly frustrated, at least people that are coming into my world, when they feel like they go to those people that should feel trusted, and they feel like they kind of just end up leaving as like conversing with a medications dealer, right? They're like, that's not why I'm here. That's not really what I'm interested in, right? So it's just kind of, it's very eye-opening to me how coming out of 2023, transitioning into 2024, how many individuals are coming to me and they're never being taught how their body actually works, or more so why their body is behaving the way that it is, because there's probably a reason for it. It's not just this, oh my gosh, poof, out of nowhere, I became pre-diabetic. And it's like, there's probably a series of events that kind of led us to this place, or gut issues, or elevated cholesterol, or hypothyroidism, or menstrual cycle irregularities, or hypothyroidism, or you name it, right? It's like there's going to be a series of events that kind of led to this particular place, and somebody that's truly advocating and is acting more of like a medical detective for you and with you as an active teammate in that journey should help you kind of parse that apart, right? And unfortunately, I feel like sometimes meeting with individuals, which don't get me wrong, I love this. So like, secretly, I'm glad that I'm that person that's teaching them how their body works. But also at the same time, I'm like, us grown adults out there, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at us wandering around in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And like, nobody has ever put the pieces of the puzzle together for us and like taught us how our body actually works. That is what root cause medicine really is, right? So for example, I feel like sometimes in my office space, I'm kind of one of the first ones that's connecting the dots for individuals around things like elevated cholesterol, right? I'm like, is it elevated cholesterol or is it unchecked inflammation, right? And they're like, well, what do you mean by that, right? It's like, well, cholesterol is an anti-inflammatory molecule. It is something that our liver creates based off of need and demand. And cholesterol also is used to make all of our cell membranes and all of our steroid hormones, like our sex hormones and our stress hormones. So somewhere along the line, the body is being called and being asked to make more cholesterol in response to this, right? So it's like, if we have this chronically elevated cholesterol, a lot of times individuals, I know that there's always that like, oh, it's just genetic. I have a family history of that too. I'm like, yeah, there might be some genetic variability to that too, but did you just also inherit like the same inflammatory patterns that your family has kind of passed down? Or is it truly like something out of our control? I don't truly believe that it's something out of our control. I feel like we have a lot of control over a really big chunk of those health outcomes, right? So I always ask the question, I'm like, okay, is it elevated cholesterol or is that really just how your body is showing elevated inflammation right now? We really actually need to go inflammation hunting and figure out why your cholesterol is elevated, not just squash the cholesterol here, but the body's going to spring that same inflammation up somewhere else, right? So you just try to put like an artificial Band-Aid on that number on a lab, the inflammation is going to show up somewhere else. It's like, it'll show up in my triglycerides. It'll show up in my blood sugar. It'll show up in my hemoglobin A1C. It'll show up in my insulin. It'll show up in my gut. It'll show up in my adrenals. It's going to show up somewhere because we didn't really do anything about the inflammation. So from a root cause perspective, I always see it as like, is it elevated cholesterol or do we need to check the thyroid? Do we need to be looking at what's going on in the gut? What's going on with liver detoxification pathways? What about overall toxin burden? What about overall cholesterol, or what about overall cortisol levels and unmanaged stress or trauma, right? It's like, oh, that's how you think about being a medical detective when it comes to someone's health and looking at a cholesterol number? Yeah, absolutely it is. Or I kind of ask the question sometimes, it's like, oh, is it hypothyroidism? We come in and it's like, oh, I'm on this thyroid medication and my doctor said I would just be on it for the rest of my life. It's like, okay, it's like, let's kind of dig into that a little bit, right? It's like the thyroid is the body's safety signal, right? So it's like, that's what's going to determine the body feeling like, oh, I have plenty of energy to like upregulate metabolic processes, or like, ooh, we're kind of in survival mode. I need to down regulate the metabolism. I need to slow things down, slow down digestion, slow down body temperature, slow down like hair, skin, nail growth, right? So I start to ask him like, so hypothyroidism, there's a safety switch here where the body doesn't feel safe. Why? Why does the body not feel safe, right? Is putting something like thyroid hormone into the system the only answer? It's like, no, that might be a bridge solution, but it's not likely answering the question of like, why does the body not feel safe? It's still going to show up somewhere else. So again, it's like, is it hypothyroidism, or do we need to be looking at what the heck is going on with your adrenals? What about your blood sugar balance? What about nutrient deficiencies? What about underfueling patterns, right? Over exercise patterns. That's how we kind of look at like a hypothyroidism picture if we're truly thinking about like root cause medicine. Or what about like autoimmune disease patterns? These are popping up all over the place. There's hundreds of different autoimmune disease patterns now, and most of the time we're seeing 60 to 70% of those autoimmune disease patterns showing up in women, right? And so we have to start to think like, is there kind of a correlation here, right? Because autoimmune patterns, yeah, we have all of these like target tissues throughout our body where our immune system might be, kind of attacking that area, but it's not the organ that's struggling here, right? So it's like in an autoimmune pattern like Hashimoto's, it's like, this isn't a thyroid problem, this is an immune system problem. Or in an autoimmune pattern like a Crohn's disease, it's like, this isn't like a gut issue. This is an immune response issue, which the immune system is housed in the gut, so I get it. Or like a rheumatoid arthritis. It's like, this isn't a joint problem. This is an immune system problem. So we have to kind of ask, it's like, is it autoimmune disease, or is the body trying to communicate with us that it's like hitting a breaking point with stress and toxic overload and leaky gut? Like, we need to be asking questions like in an autoimmune pattern, like gut bacterial balance, drainage and detox pathways, trauma and nervous system response. Like, these are the kinds of questions that when we start to talk about like what is root cause medicine, or what should like a true like medical detective be helping you do, these are the types of things that we need to be really thinking about, because otherwise it's kind of like, I call it like whack-a-mole medicine, right? Where we know that there's probably some underlying root causes, and it's the body desperately trying to communicate with us through all of these different channels. It could be trying to communicate like poor gut health. It's like, it could show up in your skin. It could show up in our mood. It could cause anxiety. It could cause insomnia. It could cause, digestive symptoms. But it's like, there's so many different places where the like digestive system or nervous system or liver detoxification pathways, like these things at the root cause of how our body functions, it's just going to spring up in a bunch of different areas if we try to just like play like whack-a-mole medicine. And here we are like desperately trying to cover these geysers that just keep springing up. And now all of a sudden, before we know it, we look back and it's like, whoa, why am I on 5 different prescription medicines, 10 different supplements? Like, what am I doing here, right? It's like, great question. Like, that's where my thought process goes too, is like starting to really think about how a lot of these symptoms are correlated and they start to relate together. And so that way it doesn't seem like, oh my gosh, I have fatigue, but I have anxiety and I have insomnia, and I also have really bad PMS or PMDD. I have super heavy cycles. I was diagnosed with an endometriosis. Now I think I have a gluten intolerance, and I also have chronic constipation. I'm like, okay, I think all of these probably fit together. I think this is the body trying to communicate with us like, yo, I've been trying to let you know that things aren't great underneath the surface, but I've had to do that by kind of popping up in multiple different areas because it doesn't seem like you're really getting the message, right? So that's where we have to start to come to the table. And I think it can be immensely helpful. And honestly, especially in today's world, almost like absolutely necessary when you get to a certain point in your health journey. Call upon the help, right? It's like, you probably won't be able to play that like whack-a-mole kind of medicine or that Band-Aid kind of medicine on your own, because you're going to need someone to help guide you. And truly, like I said, I truly wish we were taught this more from a younger age, but like, you're going to need to learn, even if it's into adulthood now, like, how does my body work? How does one system impact another? I can't tinker with the system over here and expect it to not impact the rest of the body as a whole, right? So when we kind of zoom out, we have to respect the fact that like, if you try to turn off, just like straight up turn off like inflammation or symptoms in one place, but the root cause of it still remains, it's just going to pop up somewhere else, right? And so I think the best analogy I heard at one point in time, which I'll share with you guys, is like, humans are kind of like plants, right? As much or as little as we want to admit it, it's like, oh, we love food and we love sunshine and we love being outdoors. I'm like, yeah, we actually kind of thrive when we treat ourselves as a house plant, right? But when we think about like a plant, anything that's going wrong with the plant, it's going to show up in its extremities, right? It's going to show up in its leaves. It's going to show up in its branches. It's going to show up in its bark, right? And you're like, man, that plant looks sickly, right? It's like, there's something not right with that. And so any good botanist that comes along, or arborist that comes along, they're not just going to like pluck off the leaves or cut off the branch. They're going to start to look and be like, oh man, what's going on here? The first thing that they're going to do is sample the soil, right? Or they're going to start to look at the environment around the tree or the plant. And they're like, I wonder what's not helping this plant fully thrive or survive, either in this environment or in the resources of the soil that it's getting, right? So that's where we as humans honestly are no different. It's like we need to treat it. It's like if things on the outside, whether it's our body composition, whether it's our skin, whether it's our energy, whether it's our hair, whether it's our color or our vitality or how we're showing up in the world or our mood that we're projecting to other people, all of that is going to be like, I better look under the hood. Like what's not going or it's not like well balanced from an overall hormones or nutrients or lab panels. Like let's dig into the soil and start to look at like, is this body not getting the resources that it needs? Because once you start to balance that, starts to thrive again, right? Same thing with a plant. You start to balance out, maybe it's a pH imbalance in the soil, or maybe the plant's not getting enough water, or the plant's not getting enough nutrients from the soil, right? Minerals from the soil. You start to rebalance that, and now all of a sudden the plant thrives again. And that couldn't be more similar to how like a root cause medicine or root cause healing should be starting to look underneath the surface as well too, or look at like our soil. Our soil just ends up being internal, right? Like looking at labs, looking at blood work, looking at our environment, people we're surrounding ourselves with, our exposure to sunlight and nature and positive conversations and community and all of those types of things is really like, oh, that's medicine. I'm like, yeah, bro, like that's medicine. And I think our like ancient definition and understanding of medicine was honestly right in line. If you go way back to the man, the myth, the legend himself of Hippocrates, who first infamously quoted, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food," was really what we have gotten so far away from as a society with all of these like medical advancements and big pharma and science. And don't get me wrong, full send bless. Like, heck yes, we need those types of medical advancements, but more so for those situations where we need like life-saving interventions, right? You're gonna need a different intervention of like, oh my gosh, I broke my arm, than like I'm anxious and I can't sleep and my menstrual cycles are wonky, right? Like those are two different kind of like types and approaches to medicine. If like my arm is falling off, like I'm probably not going to eat enough protein to rebuild it, right? Like I'm gonna need a different medical intervention. We just can't expect or ask that system of medical intervention to fill the gap that our more like ancient medicines should be filling for us, right? So release the expectation, of what one professional might be able to do for you, because like I said, an MD of the present isn't really able to act as a medical detective now because they're being pushed into a system that rewards them for being more of a medication dealer. So it is what it is, and that's okay. We just need to then source our own healing and learn how to turn back into how do we access our own inner healing and go back to a lot of those like, what's the soil look like? What is that environment and resources that I'm giving to my body as our most powerful prescriptions that we can probably source for ourselves. And so as today, that's what I really wanted to dig into, was helping you guys understand that I think the most powerful prescription that we have available to us, although it's probably the most underutilized as well too, is the food that we're putting in our body. Our nutrition is like day one, phase one, do not pass go, do not collect $200. If that foundation of our soil isn't right, I'm not saying it has to be perfect and we're not out here being humans and enjoying some of our favorite foods in social situations with positive community around us. Yes, that can totally be part of life's balance. But I think more so than anything, we're seeing a world where either we're being told that nutrition is completely discarded, like, oh, what you eat, when you eat, how you eat, like it doesn't matter for your hormones. Like I've physically heard that from like well-learned doctors, if you get my stepbrother's reference there, right? And so it's like, that to me is like appalling that somebody would say in a medical profession that what you eat, when you eat, how you eat has no impact on our overall metabolic health or foundational health. I'm like, I think that's us like everything, right? And it's so overlooked because we want the quick fix, the fancy thing, the hey, save me doc type approach. And that's just, it doesn't exist, right? That's more those life-saving interventions of things that we might need right now. So when we kind of go back to accessing that powerful prescription, I want you guys to have a better modality to think about like the power of that prescription of food, right? So really what I want to leave you guys with today is, as you start to think about rounding out 2023, starting 2024, I would really, really urge you, if there's one thing that you do for your overall health journey, is a very big like nutrition reset, right? And that's mental and physical reset, because I think that there is just some invaluable things that food does for our body that we haven't even like been able to tap and understand yet, right? So really, I just want to leave you guys with like 4 main things when we think about like the irreplaceable role of nutrition when it comes to our health. What's the role that nutrition is filling that we really can't get from anything else, or kind of even if we try to bottle it, doesn't match it, right? So number 1 is going to be viewing nutrition as building blocks. That's what our food does, right? Our food comes into the system, our body has to digest it, break it down into small pieces, absorb it into our gut, and now once it's in the bloodstream, now our body can assimilate it and use it throughout the entire body, right? So when we start to think about that, it's like, oh, wow, so my body is literally made up of what I have eaten. Yes, it is. And it's also made up of what you ate, right? So like when we think about like eating other animals or eating things that are like made from a chemical laboratory, it's like what went into that food and then what food is going into me, like that's really what we're made up of. So when we think about like protein in general, right? Protein it builds structure like muscle tissue, which is the firepower of our metabolism. Protein is broken down into individual constituents called amino acids, and those amino acids are required for liver detoxification. Probably one of the biggest asks of our body from an amino acid standpoint, aside from building muscle, is using it to help detox, right? All of the different things that we're going to be exposed to on a regular basis, our body has to be able to get those out of the body. If we're protein deficient, it ain't going to happen. Not to mention like pathways like methylation, sulfation, glucuronidation, all of those are dependent on protein. So if you're not doing those things through the liver, like good luck with your hormones. So this is what I mean when people are like, oh, your food doesn't matter for your hormone balance. I'm like hell it does. Like that's going to be a huge difference maker. Somebody is not going to get very far in their overall health journey without understanding how to view their food as a building block for their overall health. We also think about things like fats, breaking down into fatty acids. Those are essential for optimal hormone production, specifically like your steroid hormones, your sex hormones, and your stress hormones, because they're made from cholesterol, right? So it's like, tell me that my diet doesn't matter when it comes to my health and my hormones and my metabolic health. That's probably a pretty far-fetched one to sell, that doesn't play a role, right? So we can think about things like building blocks. We can also think about things like essential cofactors. Cofactors is really just a fancy way of saying, with all of these enzymatic reactions that we have in our body, vitamins and minerals that we get from food actually act as a little bit of a lock and key mechanism. So there's certain processes in our body that would not happen without certain vitamins and minerals. And I know that some people are like, well, I take a DV multivitamin. I'm like, there is no way that you can process and package vitamins in the same bioavailability that we get through food. We can try, and I think it's helpful to fill in the gaps. This is not me being anti-multivitamin. This is me being anti somebody thinking that taking a multivitamin excuses them from giving a shit about what they eat. If you really want to cut it coarse, right? That's what I think a lot of times we lean on these supplements to like save us. And it's like, oh, I take a greens powder every day. I'm like, I don't care. Like you still have to eat vegetables. Like, take a greens powder if you want to, if you like the taste of it, but it doesn't excuse you from getting like the nutrients from food the way that it was designed to be processed through food. So we have all of these essential vitamin and mineral cofactors. Just to share a few different examples, I mean, I'm not going to make this a whole biochemistry lesson, but I think it's helpful to kind of think about, right? So we think about like all of our neurotransmitters in our brain, right? So like things like serotonin, which converts into melatonin. So sleep and relaxation and recovery and those feel-good hormones, or excuse me, those feel-good neurotransmitters. Something like a serotonin, it needs B6, it needs folate, and it needs zinc. Right? So it's like if our diet is deficient in those things, we're going to have trouble making serotonin. We're going to have trouble converting into melatonin. Or things like dopamine in our brain requires magnesium, requires copper. Right? So it's like all of these types of things. You're like, oh, wow. So I can't just supplement with these isolated nutrients or just take a multivitamin. I'm like, no, the body requires balance of all of these things. Vitamin C is required for activating collagen in our body. Vitamin D is required to carry and deposit calcium appropriately and make sure it gets put in the right spots, like bone and teeth, and not in the wrong spots, like building up plaque in arteries. So there's lots of different things that like vitamin and minerals coming from our food act as these essential cofactors for a lot of these things to even happen. So it's kind of crazy because like nutrient deficiencies, blatant nutrient deficiencies have been implicated in many neurological conditions, like especially anxiety and depression, as well as autoimmune patterns too. So these are things that I use a lot in practice, like using food as medicine to help these individuals, because a lot of times these things are manifesting because our body is trying to communicate with us that there's a nutrient deficiency behind the scenes too. Number 3, when it comes to food as medicine, is energy substrates. Not a rocket science thing here, people, right? We know that we use food as a source of energy. So our body breaks down food into these usable components that our cells can like suck up and then transform into energy for us in the form of ATP, if you kind of go back to your biochemistry classes, right? So mostly this is our body breaking down carbohydrates into usable glucose or breaking down fats into usable fatty acids. And this is kind of where that concept of metabolic flexibility is formed, right? Our body should be able to flip-flop between those two fuel sources, like sometimes burn carbs when necessary, because carbs, they like burn fast, they get us nice quick energy, but when they're gone, they're gone. And then we also have these fats that we should be able to burn for fuel, which are slow burning, nice, sustainable, stable energy throughout the day, right? But depending on our hormones, depending on our world, depending on our lifestyle factors, some of us aren't able to access that metabolic switch. And because of that, we kind of get stuck in this metabolic flexibility that becomes a carb burner. And then we end up with blood sugar issues. We end up with weight loss resistance issues. We end up with stress issues, you name it, right? So that whole concept of using food to actually dictate our overall like metabolism, energy availability is huge, right? So for anybody that comes to me and they're like, man, I'm fatigued. Like, I get that. I hear you. And if I didn't first talk about like nutrition, that is absolutely absurd of me, right? It's like energy, food, energy availability. Like that's just an obvious connection. So if that's not optimized, energy can't be optimized. If energy isn't optimized, then everything slows down. Guess what requires energy? Making hormones. Guess what requires energy? Detoxification. Guess what requires energy? Digestion. Guess what requires energy? Focus and mood and cognition, right? So it's like all of these types of things require energy at their core, and food is the foundation of all of that. And then the last thing that food really does for us as well too is it modulates inflammation. And this means like both halves. It can make us more inflamed, and it can also be the most powerful anti-inflammatory that we put into our body. So what you eat, when you eat, how you eat is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest source of controllable inflammation. I talk to people about this all the time, especially when it comes to blood sugar balance. If we're not eating in a way that supports blood sugar balance, we have so much uncontrolled inflammation that there's no way. You could take all of the fancy anti-inflammatories in the world, you could take all of the hormone replacement in the world, and like it ain't gonna do shit. Right? Because our body has so much unchecked inflammation because we're riding this blood sugar roller coaster. We're on our way to insulin resistance. We have mitochondrial dysfunction. Our adrenals are getting burnt out, and it's like womp womp, right? And not to mention the quality of the food for us, right, can also be a source of inflammation depending on, like processing foods, more of our flour or starch or sugar-based foods, or even, more of our inflammatory oils and kind of that fried food family, as well as preservatives. Like all of those types of things can really drive inflammation, oxidative stress as well too. So when we zoom out and start to think about this conversation of root cause medicine, there's no way that the foundation of nutrition as the most powerful prescription that we have in root cause medicine isn't the very first conversation, right? And if it's not, then I think we're kind of spinning our wheels and we're probably doing ourselves a really major disservice. Now, when I say that, that's why I created this Master Your Metabolism Masterclass that I'm launching on January 6th, because even when I talk about nutrition, I have a very clear idea of what that means for each individual, right? There's going to be a level of customization, but there's also a level of we have to just eat like our human nature was designed to eat. And what does that system look like to keep it simple and to keep it stress-free? Because trust me, there's lots of different nutritional programs out there, and it's really just this fancy elimination diet. It's super restrictive. It feels like it's not sustainable. It focuses on quantity, like counting macros or counting calories or allowed and not allowed foods. None of that, right? That is not a great mental or physical headspace. It's not sustainable for everybody, and sure isn't going to fit into a family structure or something that you can teach your kids, which is my ultimate goal, right? Don't pass on the generational trauma of having a poor relationship and understanding with food. Do this for you and then go teach, right? Let's spread how simple this can really be. So that's why I created the Master Your Metabolism Masterclass, is so that we can have access to using nutrition as our most powerful prescription and not accidentally thinking that, oh, I'm out there eating clean or counting macros or doing this, and it may not be exactly what your body's understanding of food is. So if that's of interest to you, or you feel like you've kind of been chasing a bunch of these different symptoms and this kind of conversation around root cause medicine is speaking to you today, I would encourage you to sign up for my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. I'll make sure that the link to sign up here is in the caption of this video. If you're watching this video now and you've made it this far, use my $50 off early bird discount before December 15th. All one word, lowercase, early bird 50. So EARLYBIRD 50. That will get you $50 off, whether you want to register for just the course itself or you want to register for the bundle package, which offers the course and a comprehensive set of fasted labs that will interpret together as well too. So if you want to add labs on, or you haven't been able to get good foundational, full, comprehensive metabolic health and hormone labs from your doctor or practitioner, like a full thyroid panel, full blood sugar panel, these are the types of things that I would really encourage you to do as well too as part of that course. So we go live on January 6th. That early bird code is good through December 15th. So make sure that you register to snag your spot. And I'll be hopeful to see a lot of your faces there, because I want to really show you guys what this looks like to make nutrition your most powerful prescription.